Bienvenue, Madame la Ministre.
Welcome, Madam Minister. We understand that you are here during the first hour with us and that your officials will stay with us after for the second hour. Welcome. And you have the floor, Madam Minister.
Merci pour l'invitation. Je suis contente d'être.
I am pleased to be here to discuss the government's response to this committee's study of the Translation Bureau. With me is my Deputy Minister, Marie Lebay, and Adam Gibson.
Translation Bureau is a unique Canadian institution. Its founding in 1934 was an affirmation of Canada's reality and the rightful place of two languages. From the beginning, the work of the Bureau has been invaluable in fostering respect for our linguistic duality. Generations of linguistic professionals have dedicated their special skills and talents to helping transform the federal government's capacity to serve Canadians in the language of their choice. This legacy of pride in their place and quality of their work has been taken up by today's generation of employees who are making a contribution that is much larger than simply words. Je m'engage à donner.
I am committed to restoring pride and honor to the Translation Bureau.
Actively contributes to supporting linguistic duality within the Government of Canada. Mr. Chair, the mandate of the Bureau is as important as it has ever been. Even though the employees have made and continue to make an outstanding contribution, I think that their work has not always been given the recognition it deserves. A new approach is long overdue. As a champion of official languages, I am determined to lead by example by reinforcing the value of bilingualism to Canadians. I am committed to renewing the Translation Bureau as a centre of excellence ready to embrace innovation, adopt leading-edge practices, and recruit the best in class. As home to one of the largest French-speaking populations in the world, Canada is a world leader in maintaining the highest standards in terminology, translation, and interpretation. I am grateful to the committee for having undertaken this study and for formulating your recommendations. Your work has highlighted some of the key issues around the Official Languages Act and the role of the Translation Bureau in support of Canada's linguistic duality. With respect to roles and responsibilities, the cornerstone of federal language policy, the Official Languages Act, recognizes English and French as equal languages in all federal institutions and obliges these institutions to do their part in promoting linguistic duality. Further, the Act clearly assigns specific responsibilities to Treasury Board Secretariat and the Department of Canadian Heritage. Minister Bryson and Minister Joly have met with your committee to discuss those responsibilities as well as the commitments in their mandate letters regarding official languages. In November, Ministers Bryson and Joly announced a review of the official languages regulations related to communications with and services to the public. In her appearance before you, Minister Joly described the consultations with Canadians that she is leading in respect to this review. I work closely with both of my colleagues to support their efforts and ensure my department's actions are complementary. The Translation Bureau gives meaning to the Official Languages Act by providing high-quality translation, revision and interpretation services for Parliament, the judiciary and federal departments and agencies. It is also the terminology authority within the federal government. Since our response to your report was tabled, I have requested that officials of the Translation Bureau make progress in relation to your recommendations. Today, I am announcing further measures that are consistent with the direction and spirit of your report. One of those actions concerns the issue of optionality. The Translation Bureau manages, in terms of volume, 80% of the federal government's translation needs. The Common Services Policy set by Treasury Board specifies that organizations, such as the Translation Bureau, must conduct periodic reviews to assess whether their services should be optional or mandatory. These reviews are done in collaboration with the Treasury Board Secretariat. I have written to Minister Bryson requesting his support in considering reverting to a mandatory service delivery model for the Translation Bureau as a complement to other initiatives in support of official languages. I now turn to other measures that I have instructed my department to take. A hiring process is underway for a new Chief Executive Officer who should be in place by the end of March. The process was open to the public and promoted to the linguistic profession, and the selection committee will include an external expert from academia. The priorities of the CEO in the first few months on the job will focus on quality, hiring, and training, which align with the committee's concerns. I will now take a few minutes to address each of these priorities. Quality. The Translation Bureau has a strong reputation for excellence, not only across the Government of Canada, but internationally. The Bureau has developed a quality framework which includes a quality control system, a vigorous process to recruit world-class employees and freelancers, and world-class training programs for its linguistic experts. I support this process. Therefore, to further guarantee the quality of its linguistic services, the Bureau is creating the new position of Chief Quality Officer. This position will be held by a language professional who will report directly to the Bureau's CEO. The Chief Quality Officer will oversee all Translation Bureau activities affecting quality and take part in decision-making on training, technology, staffing, and other issues. In addition, the Bureau is setting up a service line that departments can call to obtain advice on linguistic services. Callers will be able to get information on things like their obligations under the Official Languages Act and standard clauses they can use in their contracts. In renewal and hiring, in recent years, loss of staff through attrition has created the need to manage lost corporate knowledge and expertise. I assure all committee members that I take this matter seriously. Our mandate is to provide federal departments with access to high-quality linguistic services. Gaps in capacity put this mandate at risk, and we are taking action and monitoring the situation. This year, the Bureau hired 19 new employees to provide linguistic services in specific domains, such as parliamentary proceedings, national protection, and meteorology. Aligned with the Prime Minister's youth strategy and as part of the Government of Canada's ongoing engagement with students and universities, the Bureau commits to hiring a minimum of 50 students per year in each of the 5 years. As well, ongoing projects are bringing experienced professionals together with the next generation of translators, interpreters, and terminologists. And initiatives are underway to increase the number of interpreter graduates from recognized universities to support additional hiring by both the Bureau and industry. We are restoring a co-op program. Many Canadian universities, including Université de Moncton, Université de Montréal, and Ottawa University, have already indicated their interest in participating. The Bureau's regional presence is important, providing key expertise to better understand the specialized needs of Canada's diverse regions. It will continue to operate its network of regional offices, which employ about 1/4 of the Bureau's 1,300 employees. As well, there are staff on site at certain military bases, such as CFB Gagetown and CFB Borden. Mr. Chair, the Translation Bureau's role in helping parliamentarians and the federal government to listen to and communicate with Canadians is critical. To increase awareness of the Bureau's role and in line with a committee recommendation, the Bureau is collaborating with the Canada School of Public Service to include this information in courses offered to all new public servants. The new curriculum will be rolled out this spring. I now turn to the language comprehension tool. With your study, the committee advanced an important conversation about how official languages and innovation intersect. The government agrees with your recommendations regarding the language comprehension tool and has acted on all of your recommendations. A plan was developed to ensure the content in the tool is regularly reviewed by professional translators. The terms of use have also been modified. As we embrace innovation, we must do so in a way that supports and advances our government's priorities related to official languages. The Online Language Portal of Canada is an example of how technology can be used to provide accessible, innovative tools to help Canadians from coast to coast to coast communicate in French and English. I now turn to the Bureau's interpretation services in particular. Efforts to put in place a request for standing offer for hiring freelance interpreters. Concerns have been expressed that the new approach does not respect official languages, in particular the quality of our services. Following careful consideration, I have cancelled the request for standing offer. I have asked officials to reset and develop a new approach based on further consultations with representatives from across the interpretation industry. Mr. Chair, any new endeavour in this area must reflect our commitment to official languages and the quality of our services. In the meantime, I assure you and committee members, all interpreters hired by the Bureau are fully accredited based on a world-renowned, proven accreditation process. Nous sommes fiers d'être partie des deux langues officielles et nous allons continuer de promouvoir, d'appuyer et de défendre du bilinguisme au Canada. As we mark Canada's 150th birthday and the things that make our country great, your report is a reminder of the Translation Bureau's contribution to linguistic duality in the public service and Parliament, and ultimately for all Canadians. The measures we are taking will enhance the Translation Bureau's ability to provide high-quality linguistic services, as it has done for over 80 years. I am committed to work with this committee, my Cabinet colleagues, and everyone who is interested to ensure the Translation Bureau continues to deliver on its mandate effectively. Merci de votre.
Thank you for your attention.
I'm now happy to answer your questions.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Ministre.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister, for your presentation. And thank you for your comments about your work in cooperation with members of the committee. We will now immediately move on to questions and comments. I will start with Bernard Généreux. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Madam Minister. It's good to see you here this morning. Madam Minister, from what I understand, as of March 9th, it is expected that there will be new ways of doing things, and we will no longer be relying on the lowest bidder for contracts for translators and interpreters. It's my understanding that you are completely canceling this particular measure. You are going to indefinitely put off the implementation of another way of doing that, including taking into account quality?
Absolutely. If I could start by thanking our interpreters as well, because they're such an important part of everything we do in the Government of Canada. So thank you so much. Merci. We are intent on making sure that the quality that is needed to provide both official languages is made available through any process we enter into. So that is why we have postponed the request that was supposed to clue up within a matter of days, March 9th. We want to make sure that we get this right, so we want to consult with the various stakeholders across the spectrum. Again, because our focus as a government is to ensure that we provide quality services, we are committed to official bilingualism. So we are going to consult with all of the stakeholders to make sure that we get this right.
Est-ce que vous êtes en mesure de m'expliquer
Could you explain to me what was the reasoning behind this potential policy that might have been applied, which is to go get the lowest price? Because what witnesses explained to us Tuesday, who are representatives of different associations of interpreters in Canada, was that the policy that was going to be implemented did not really take quality into account, only the lowest price. What had led to a policy like that one?
Like you, I am concerned that such a policy existed. For the past year, under this government, we have been working really hard to change the face of the Translation Bureau. That is why we have canceled the March 9th deadline to go back out and to further consult with individuals to make sure that they have a say in how we go forward, that we go forward in a way that is acceptable to those who we work with and who we engage and who are so important in making sure that this process is one that is effective, but that it is also based on quality and not necessarily lowest price.
OK. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I'd like to take a closer look at your text. You're talking about hiring a new CEO at the Translation Bureau. Was it planned that, I forget the current CEO's name, but was she expected to retire, or was this something that was expected, or was it unexpected that she would leave?
Donna, I forget, what was Donna's last name?
Donna Achimov, she's now in another position.
Madame Achimov, yeah.
Donna is no longer in that position. She's gone on to an HR position. So we're looking to hire someone of the caliber who we think needs to be there to head up the Translation Bureau.
OK. Vous parlez aussi de la formation et de...
You also referred to training and putting things in place to retain or to preserve the potential of translators in Canada. You're talking about skills transfer. You also, I think it was one of our recommendations, in fact, you talk about the School of the Public Service offering courses to all new government officials. What's the case for current government workers? Do they have access to those courses?
Écoutez, je suis pas certaine.
Look, I'm not sure. We'll have to get back to you on that, but I think that government officials would currently have access to those. If it's available to new hires, if it's available at the School of the Public Service, everyone has access. Yes, we just got confirmation. Everyone would have access. Okay, because you referred to new hires, but this would also apply to current employees, current government workers, because for us on the committee, it's essential that all government workers across the board have access to those courses. That's fundamental.
In fact, that should be part of our approach on a go-forward basis, but I think they do avail now of programs that are available to them.
OK. J'ai encore du temps.
Okay, do I still have some time left? A few seconds. Okay, well, I'd like to congratulate you, Minister, because the witnesses we heard from earlier this week were very concerned about quality. I think Obviously, the public service is not a private company, and so price is, of course, important, but quality and value for money is fundamental. So thank you very much. Thank you, Bernard. We're now going to move to Paul Lefebvre. Minister, first of all, thank you so much. Thanks for listening, and thanks for following what this group has been doing as a team on this committee, the Official Languages Committee. I see that 8 decisions have been made, 8 areas of progress, and those are all consistent with our recommendations. So thank you very much for that. I think we're very proud to be able to work together here as a team and with the Minister's office. So thanks again. It's very nice to see. There was a time when some suggested that quality was not as important as price, but that didn't work, and I think we all got that. So we're delighted. I'm very delighted to hear that quality is taking its rightful place. So after our first report was tabled, we were really not very happy with the response. So what happened? What gave? How is it that there's this new, why are you giving us this new sort of approach to responding? Thanks for the question.
In responding to the report, we could have elaborated a bit more than we did, certainly recognizing all of the work that had been done by the committee. So I think that was a shortcoming on our part. It was really important to let you know the measures that were ongoing in the Translation Bureau. I think the report itself, the response to the report, while it stated things that were happening in the Bureau, I don't think it went far enough. It wasn't thorough enough in terms of allowing you to understand the work that had been done. Having said that, I really appreciated the feedback from the committee because in reading your feedback and recognizing that there are other things that can be done. So it was really because of your efforts, in conjunction with the ongoing efforts of the Bureau, but your efforts and being engaged as much as you were enabled us to look at other opportunities and other things we could do. So the idea, for instance, of writing to Minister Bryston to ask that the use of the Translation Bureau be made mandatory. So things that came out of your concerns, we were able to take and make them and take positive measures as a result of them. So merci beaucoup.
No, thank you. I also seen that in your answers to the report that you're looking at, well, you will be hiring 50 students each year. So I'm wondering what measures is the department looking at putting in place to make this happen, and how will these be done across the country?
Well, I can certainly get Adam to elaborate on that, but let me say that this is a measure that's near and dear to my heart. I think it's really important as someone who's learning the language to make sure that we provide opportunities for students who are already who already know the language or are learning the language. I think it's really important that we engage them as well. We are looking regionally. I've mentioned some of the universities that have expressed interest in the co-op program. There are others. So we're working very closely with them and at different areas of the country where we know we have had representation from those areas of the country. And as well, of course, we have a couple of our bases where we have where bilingualism is really important as well. So it's based on quality, but I'm going to allow Adam to elaborate in terms of how students that you know, and anyone on the committee may know, that may be able to take advantage of this opportunity.
So I'll add a little more precision. We've already done a call out to essentially all of the different linguistic schools across the country that we work with regularly, so anyone that has an actual translation program. And this is why we have some early feedback. We know that a number of universities, we expect all, will be interested. And then through our planning process, we've essentially reprioritized how we're managing our forward planning to make sure that we actually are encompassing students in our forward plan. So we talk about the next 5 years. This is just a good thing in general. I think beyond 5 years, we should be doing this. And it's just part of our regular process of having fresh blood always coming in and making sure we're contributing to the overall program. I think the only other thing I'd mention is it links very solidly with our regional presence as well. We have a number of regional offices directly in the cities where these schools are located, so students don't necessarily have to move to have these jobs. Okay. And so we will be hiring in local areas as well.
Puis ça, c'est une excellente nouvelle. Assurer la pérennité.
That's great news. The whole world is looking at us and our employment strategy, and the way things were heading was really concerning for a lot of people. So it's great to see this new policy of investing in the next generation of translators. Canada is seen as a powerhouse internationally, and reinvesting in that is fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you. Paul, we're going to go now to Francois Choquette. Thank you very much, Minister. And I'd like to thank you also for this response, because the first one was truly disappointing. This is a lot better. It's much more positive. I would have liked to see it sooner, but we're still pretty happy with it. Minister, I received lots of letters, and I know studies were done that show that things really aren't going so well at the Translation Bureau. The atmosphere isn't so great. I think there's one study that shows it's one of the worst workplaces in the public service currently. So the problem is huge right now. I know 12 people have been hired this year, but 400 positions have disappeared over the past 4 years. And in 2017-18, 140 more positions will disappear. So 12 new hires out of about 500 positions scrapped. That's really a drop in the bucket. What is the political will to make this workplace a more positive and pleasant one, given the huge pressures on the shoulders of interpreters and translators? There has to be a more major hiring program, because 12 jobs really isn't very meaningful. Thanks for the question.
As you say, a quarter of the workforce was lost from the Translation Bureau, way too many. Obviously, that is going to impact those that remain, because I guess if you don't see an infusion of new talent and new people coming in to your fold, then that impacts morale as well, because you wonder if it will go by the wayside. The reality is that we've hired actually 19 this year, contrary to what would have happened if we hadn't hired the 19 this year. The plan was to lose another 30 some odd positions. So we have reversed that trend. It is a trend that I'm happy to reverse, given my commitment to bilingualism, but given this government's commitment to quality and to bilingualism. So we are looking at the needs, and as I said initially, one of the things I've done is written to Minister Bryson to ask that use of the Translation Bureau be mandatory. Quality is what's really important to us here, so we are focusing on that. We are working closely with the employees. I know that my deputy has reached out to the employees, and Adam has as well, again, to make sure that we understand what their concerns are, what their issues are, and how we can deal with those, because we want to have a happy, productive workforce, particularly in the Translation Bureau. As you say, the demands are great, And we want to make sure that in responding to those, they feel comfortable that they have the time to do what needs to be done to ensure that the work they do is quality work.
Donc, Madame la ministre, je comprends ce que vous me mentionnez.
So, Minister, I get that. Have you planned, are you currently planning the number of people you're going to need to hire? Because in 2017-18, 140 people would leave through attrition. Are you planning to replace those 140 people? There will be 140 vacant positions. Are those going to be filled? Will new people be hired? Can you confirm that?
In place with respect to that?
Bonjour, merci beaucoup.
Good morning. Thanks very much. As the minister said, we've reversed the trend. And what's changing now is, well, it's really a new era for the Translation Bureau. The atmosphere has changed, the workload has changed, and you heard the minister say she truly wants to put quality at the forefront of what the Bureau does. So the new CEO will be a very important player too. We're going to ask that individual to assess the current climate, the current situation, and that person will decide how many people need to be hired and so on. I can't tell you at this juncture, but what we can say is that this is a change, this is a new era. Thank you very much. Minister, you spoke to Scott Bryson about Treasury Board, potentially making it optional or going from optional to mandatory when it comes to the Translation Bureau's provision of services. How long should we wait for an answer? What's the timetable here? How long are we going to have to wait for Treasury Board's recommendation?
To Minister Bryson, giving him some time, obviously. I have not heard back from him. The letter only would have gone maybe a week ago, so we need to give him some time. But again, pointing out, and I don't need to do this to my colleague because he knows that we see our job as a government to promote, protect, and defend bilingualism, and we need to take whatever measures we can to do that. And what I am asking him would be one of many measures that we're implementing. So in terms of a time frame, I don't have that for you, but I can tell you that we're all wedded to the same idea as a government and as cabinet ministers, that we need to do everything we can to ensure the quality of the services coming out of our government, and certainly we have a role to promote and defend.
Merci beaucoup, François.
Thanks very much, Francois, and thank you, Minister, for your answers. We're now going to go to Daryl Sampson. I got 2 mics on because I'm going to speak twice. Minister.
Start off because I had a dream. If I'd had a dream last night and I was dreaming about translation and the office of the translation, this would have been my dream.
Merci.
Le point que je vais faire, Madame la Ministre, comme député,
I have to say, as an MP, Minister, today I feel more committed, more involved in our democratic processes. I think everyone around the table, I think this is an opportunity for people to see a committee that has heard from witnesses on such an important topic, a fundamental issue in our democracy, bilingualism and our 2 official languages. And we reflected on the issue as politicians. We played our role, which is an essential one, and we made recommendations. And as you know, things don't always play out the way you want. But in this case, under your leadership, thanks to our efforts and your efforts, our efforts fed into your efforts. We took the information, we analyzed it, we interpreted it, and now the ultimate goal was to make things different for Canadians, and what a great gift for the 150th anniversary.
Donc, je veux quand même 2 endroits.
It brings tears to the eyes. But what I'm really concerned about is quality. when we ensure that the quality is there, that the service is of sufficient quality, that is crucial. And congratulations on that point. The other thing that I'm very concerned about, your translators are great. When they can understand what I'm saying with all the emotion, and I congratulate them every time because that's a huge challenge. But I used to be the superintendent of a number of primary schools in Nova Scotia. Education is key. The young people will take our place in the future, and the steps that you're taking, the 50 co-op jobs and so on, the efforts to support renewal, to include various universities across the country, that's a show of exceptional leadership, and I'd like to thank you for that, and that will guarantee success for years and years and years to come. For the 200th anniversary, Canada's 200th birthday, most of you won't be here, but I intend to be here. So the chair's pretty good too.
Because we were running into a cement wall. And I don't want to play politics, but what was the scenario on the ground? I mean, adding 19, but also not eliminating 30 plus. That's a 50 plus. That's exceptional on the first move. So what plan, long term? I mean, you talk short term, that's different as far as the cuts being taken place and what we need to do. Because, of course, if Mr. Bryson and Treasury Board approves, then that is mandatory. Now we're into major work.
Merci. The number I have is that were cut or that were lost through attrition were 450. A significant number when you consider, how many employees we now have in the Bureau. And I think our number now is 1,300?
Close to 1,200 FTEs.
Close to 1,200 full-time, as FTEs, right? Full-time employees. So it was a significant number, and obviously it had to have an impact. And I think, and I want to go back again to your work and the work of this committee that enabled us to look at things a little differently and enabled us to look at other measures that we could take and we should be taking, again, in keeping with the philosophy behind where we are as a government and as the party of official bilingualism. It was really important for us to look at your report, respond to your report, but at the same time, hearing your outcry, because it really wasn't thorough enough, and that was to say, well, if it wasn't, aren't there other things we could be doing? And that's what leadership is about. That's what being in a department is about. That's what having different entities and departments are about. Allowing them to look beyond, allowing them to go the extra mile, allowing them to come up with. And I remember saying to them when I first met with the Translation Bureau, the sky is the limit. Like, we may not be able to do it all, but think beyond what you would normally think as things that we'd like to see happen within the Translation Bureau. And I commend the Translation Bureau for doing that, but I also commend each and every one of you for the role that you played in helping us get there, because eventually we would have, but working with you makes a difference. And to quality, I want to again repeat the new position of Chief Quality Officer. That, for me, is really important. And that individual will report to the new CEO.
Thank you very much. I know my dream was up there too. So I'll finish, but maybe someone will continue the question. But I did want to say, what measures will be put in place in accountability to ensure that it is happening on the ground and that it continues to happen and that the improvements are in place. So I know I ran out of time, but maybe some of my colleagues might allow you some time to expand on that. I'd really appreciate to hear that.
Merci beaucoup, Daryl.
Thank you very much, Daryl. We're going to move on to René Arsenault. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Minister. I'm sure my colleague from New Brunswick will agree that often that the light comes from the Atlantic. All joking aside, inaudible for the interpreter. Sincerely, thank you very much. I'm making jokes, but I would like to add on to the first part of what our friend Daryl said, his brief intervention. Since I've been elected, since I've been part of committees, I could say that this one, the recommendations that you had that were very clear, well, they were the result of an incredible amount of cooperation between our Liberal colleagues, Conservative colleagues, and NDP colleagues. Unbelievable cooperation, a surprising amount of collaboration, and I want Canadians to know that this works. Democracy works. We often hear cynical things, but it works well, and the fact that your department had before it recommendations of this quality and reacted with quality. Thank you 1,000 times over. Now, I don't want to ask the same questions that my colleagues already have, but my legal expert, my lawyer side, tells me that the minister before me is responsible for buying everything from planes to toilet paper, is responsible for carpet cleaning to security services. In all of that, we have the Translation Bureau. How? For the future, because, Madam Minister, you may not always be there in 50 years' time. How can we ensure that when it comes to purchasing all those goods and services, that what we concerns us today, translation, that it's marked as a special service, that it be of a unique quality for Canada? How can we make sure that in the future we will not have to make these same arguments again, and that these services will remain just as important then as you describe now?
Well, I can certainly attest to the fact that as long as this government continues to exist, that there will be a place for the Translation Bureau, and it will be focused on quality. There is no doubt about that. And within the government itself, it really doesn't matter where it's located, as long as the commitment is there to do what needs to be done, to respond positively, and again, to promote and defend official bilingualism. So that is as much as we can commit to as a government. As you know, we talked about jobs lost, and I'm glad you took the time to commend your colleagues on the committee, because the committee did work very hard to come up with very concrete recommendations, and I appreciate that. The reality is that not every government thinks the same way, but I can assure you that as minister and as a member of this government, that we will deliver on the measures that we have announced today. And I'd like to think that the proof will be in the results, that people will see that these were the right measures to take, and that because we have an obligation as a country to respect both official languages, that whoever follows this government will look at how the impact that these measures have had since they were introduced.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. On a more practical level, I was happy to see that the co-op program is going to be implemented where it's possible to set up a link between students who will eventually become translators through what I call practical internships. I believe that's going to be implemented for spring 2017 very quickly, yes?
We've already put out the ask, and we've had expressions of interest from, I think it's 8 universities. So the interest is there, something that we should have been doing before. Previous governments should have been doing. We all should be taking advantage of an opportunity where you have a co-op program, where we have people who are adhering to the idea of official bilingualism and who focus on quality. So for us, this is an opportunity, and while we say 5 years, this can go on forever. as long as we have students in co-op programs who we need to avail of to deliver on the program that through the Translation Bureau.
Okay, merci beaucoup, Madame la Ministre.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. Thank you very much, René. Now we're going to move on to Sylvie Boucher. Good morning, Madam Minister. Thank you so much. First of all, this work would have not been possible without, first of all, the witnesses, whom I wish to congratulate, all the interpreters who came to meet us, all the work that we did together. I must say that beyond politics in this committee, as my Liberal friends on the other side were saying, we rose above politics and we became citizens as we understand the meaning. Because often we can debate our respective visions, which aren't necessarily the same. But this committee, when it came to translation, we did a colossal amount of work, and I want to congratulate all the witnesses who came here, who took the time to come and tell us what their concerns were, and who, together, and we all sat down with our vision as parliamentarians, and your vision, Madam Foote, I must thank you for it. But here, we're going to be doing some politics for a few minutes. We're not just, one cannot simply just be the party of bilingualism, because that would be something that would be incumbent upon Madame Joly. We often have concerns with regards to interpretation because we heard talk of privatization. Could you tell us that there will not be privatization in the Translation Bureau?
My goal with the Translation Bureau is to make sure that we deliver on the quality services that we should be delivering on. We want to do that with our employees. We want to build the morale of our employees. At this point in time, we are hiring additional employees. So it is certainly not my goal to privatize the Translation Bureau. I think where we have an obligation as a government is to provide quality services, again, because this government is committed to official bilingualism.
No.
Bernard?
Si vous me permettez, je vais en...
If you will allow, I'd like to add something on. We have Mr. Thompson and Madame Gagnon, who came to share their concerns Tuesday of this week, Madam Minister. They represent translators throughout Canada, as well as interpreters. I think that they have done very conscientious work. I want to mention it because, in my opinion, they are a very good example of how the government apparatus works and what influence external groups can have on that apparatus itself, to influence parliamentarians to make decisions that are to the advantage of all Canadians. And I would like to call attention to their presence here today and to congratulate them for the work they did, because they came to see us. They came to see all the different parties. They presented very respectful arguments, and the arguments they had were very solid. They talked about how Canada and Canadians are going to evolve in our current society. I think, once again, we need to thank them, and I would like to add my voice to say that the committee works collaboratively and works on Canadians' real needs, and that official languages is fundamental to Canada, and all parties together, we agree on that. Once again, thank you very much.
Dan Vandal.
We will now move on to Dan Vandal. Good morning, Madam Minister. First of all, let me congratulate you as well on behalf of my citizens, St. Boniface, St. Bernardin, near Winnipeg. It is clearly a priority for them and for Canadians. You took on a controversial matter, and you found solutions, not just for today, but I hope for the long term.
10 years, it's been difficult on the department. There's been positions left unfilled, there's been cuts, there's been contracting out, there's been an approach that did the bare minimum to comply with the requirements of the Official Languages Act. And based on what you've said today, I'm confident that that's changed, but my question is over the long term. What assurances or what measures can you point to that over the long term the improvements that we're going to get in the short term are going to stay in the long term? So if you can perhaps comment on that.
I think our commitment to hiring additional employees is an important part of this. Our commitment to cooperate and with the universities and where they have the co-op programs and make that an ongoing initiative. I think the idea that we're putting in a chief quality officer is important as well, who will report to the CEO. The idea that, I'd like to see the use of the Translation Bureau made mandatory. Those are all measures that we are taking now as a government. You have referenced the fact that, people weren't hired. They were, once they left, and it was through attrition. So we lost a significant number of individuals from the Translation Bureau. That's a decision that's made by the government of the day. From my perspective here with you today, and allow me to repeat again, we are the party of official bilingualism. We are a government that's committed to quality. We want to make sure that we provide the services that Canadians need. We want to engage all of the stakeholders. And if you look at the portfolio that I lead, the department that I lead, it's a lot about consultation. It's a lot about reaching out to the stakeholders and recognizing that no one person or group has all the answers. So from our perspective here and working closely, and I'm so pleased to hear the reference to the interpreters and the translators, those who came forward to be witnesses to the committee. Really important, because we need to hear firsthand what their experiences are and what they have to say about those experiences. So we are going to do everything we can to ensure that the measures that we are taking last for a very long time.
You've mentioned, vous avez mentionné une embauche de 50.
You mentioned hiring 50 students for this year, I believe, as well as a co-op program in partnership with universities. Could you elaborate on that? Could you tell us how the co-op program is going to work? And I hope, because I think that my time is almost up, I hope that you will always consider the University of St. Boniface in your discussions with universities throughout Canada.
Go ahead. Si vous me permettez, juste avant que...
If you will allow, before Adam describes this to you in more details, I think there's an important nuance to make. The 50 students are students that are already enrolled in language programs. There might be other students as well, but this is very different. In the past, we hired students, but there was a mix. Now, there's a firm commitment to hiring 50 students in language programs. It's an important distinction to make. We're active in Winnipeg, and of course we have the intention of hiring students from St. Boniface. We've already been in contact with that university. We have a long-standing relationship with that university. That's just one thing I wanted to mention. When it comes to co-ops and the internships we're going to set up for students, I don't want to go too far into the details because even I am not exactly sure how absolutely everything is going to work, but we're going to create a program where we're going to match up students with translators who have a great deal of experience. It's not a position for students where you're going to make photocopies. That's not how it's going to work. They're really going to work in translation. We will give translations to students who will then be revised by people, senior people in our organization who will make sure that they give good training to students. That's how it's going to work. But if you'll permit, I'll add that we have other programs where we work closely with universities. We work with university programs as well. We always try to reach several institutions. Thank you very much, Dan. Daryl, a brief comment? I would just say that hiring a chief quality officer, my friend Mr. Généreux often mentions, that's really the key to success in industry, in business. And that is a clear indication that there's someone who's going to make sure that the quality is there, and that's a good thing to see. Thank you. François Jacquet, you have 2 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
When is the new quality officer going to be hired? Sorry. We're doing the administrative stuff right now, but we're going to wait for the CEO to be hired first so that the team really shares the same vision. Thank you, Ms. Lemay. So the 30 positions in 2017-18 that were scrapped through attrition, 19 were hired rather, and 30 positions disappeared. Were they translators or interpreters, or were they terminologists? No interpreter positions were eliminated. So it was a blend. It was a mix of translators and others. But we hired others. Are you hired translators or terminologists? I don't think there were any terminologists in the new hires, but I could check. Well, my concern is, I understand that there have been some huge cutbacks over the years, and there still are some major cutbacks going on. There's pressure being put on the interpreters and the translators because of those cuts. If you keep cutting and you hire terminologists, well, that's not really going to solve the problem of the pressure on the shoulders of the translators and the interpreters. Do you get my question, Minister?
And this is something we will look at in terms of our numbers and see where we've been hiring and where we haven't been and where the shortcomings are. And we will respond positively to that.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Ministre.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you, Francois, and thank you, Minister. Thanks for your excellent work, for your open-mindedness as well. And I'd like to thank all my colleagues for the chemistry we're seeing here on the committee. So once again, on behalf of everyone, a huge thank you. We intend to submit another report to the House that sums up your appearance here today. Thank you very much once again, Minister, and we're going to suspend for 5 minutes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
On poursuit notre étude.
Okay, we're going to continue along with our study of the Translation Bureau, second hour, and we appreciate having with us Mary Lemay, Deputy Minister, Public Works and Government Services, as well as Adam Gibson, Acting Chief Executive Officer, Translation Bureau, and Lucie Séguin, Vice President, Corporate Services, Translation Bureau. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this second hour with us. We're going to start right away. Well, does anyone have a report to make? Okay, no, we'll just go straight to questions and answers. So we'll start straight off with Joël Godin. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in the first hour, we congratulated Minister Foote, who took part in the exercise of appearing before us this morning and explaining what efforts were being made by the department to respond to the committee's recommendations on the Translation Bureau, and it certainly seemed that there was some wonderful cooperation going on. And I'd just like to mention, Mr. Chairman, that this happens in other places too. I'm here replacing someone else, but it was nice to see this kind of cooperative spirit around official languages and the Translation Bureau. I feel like a bit of a party pooper here, though, because with respect to recommendation number 4B, the committee recommended that the Government of Canada establish a program to regain the lost expertise around technical, scientific, and multilingual translation. Now, the department responded to 4B. The government informed the committee that it would be relying on the private sector to provide services in certain areas, including scientific, technical, and multilingual translation. I'd like to know, where's the program? Because the response doesn't really respond to the committee's recommendation. So I'd like to know what program we're talking about here, when it's going to be implemented, what's the time frame. Okay, I'll ask Adam to give you the details, but what I'd like to do, if possible, is you probably sense that this is a turning point for the Translation Bureau. There's been an evolution, and we're now in an environment that has brought us to where we are today. So it's a bit of a reboot. We're starting over, in a sense, and but we're not starting from scratch. We're continuing. The minister has sent us in a certain direction, and we're continuing to head in that direction. We may not have fully followed through on every recommendation yet, but do trust that this is not the end of the story. We're continuing to work on these things. It's a work in progress. And now I'd ask Adam to continue. So there's always a challenge, but we work closely with the industry, with the private sector, and with our clients. So I'll give you some examples where there's a shortcoming, a sort of an expertise gap within the Bureau, and where we resort to outside sources. The minister gave the example of meteorology and weather services. So there was a gap there. So we launched a competition, and we hired some indeterminate staff to fill that gap. But the demand is constantly evolving within government and outside. So there may be other areas where we need to invest to make up for gaps as those crop up. We have in-house expertise, but we work with the private sector too to try to strike a balance. We project, we do forecasts, we try to decide whether an increase in demand is going to be ongoing or just temporary. Let me just give you some examples. So there are areas like legal, where we know that there will be an ongoing demand. So where there's an ongoing demand, we do intend to hire more people. Same thing with parliamentary. This is a limited area where there's a need for expertise. Another example of the need to refresh our annual planning. I've given you a few examples of areas. We try to identify the areas where there's a shortcoming, where there's a need, and we try to strike the right balance as a result under the circumstances. I'd just like to add that what you have to understand is that our forecasts in recent years are not, in past years, will not be the same as they will be going forward. Well, I understand that, but you're talking about creating we've recommended that the government implement a program, and you're talking about responding on an ad hoc basis. Well, we'll be working with the new CEO to develop a plan for the years to come. So this is precisely the type of thing we'll be looking at about the advisability of creating a program if there's a need for that. Okay, so what you're saying is there is no program because the new CEO hasn't been hired yet. Can you commit to, once a new CEO is hired, can you commit to a new program being created? Well, I can commit to having that new CEO look at the circumstances, the needs, and so on, and to come up with the best program. It's not just about an individual here. There's a whole turning point here. We need to have a clear direction moving forward. Okay, well, you're talking about this being a great program and a new CEO being in charge of that. But what I want to know this morning is, are you committing to establishing this new program once you have a new CEO?
Yes, we will look at all the recommendations of the committee in detail, and I can't make you promises that I won't be able to keep. I just want to ensure that the intention is there. It is absolutely there. And you can invite the new person to appear before you, and perhaps they can come and share their vision with you. Thank you. Thank you, Joël. René Arsenault. Thank you. Madame Lemay, yes, we're talking about changing course. I understand that there's going to be a new CEO by the end of the financial year. It's what we hope. It depends on people's availability. But yes, we're in that process, and it will be done by the end of the year. Within Minister Foote's department, is it unusual to have a CEO to deal with the quality of a particular service? Do you mean the Chief Quality Officer or the CEO? For the Translation Bureau, or for quality, yes. Yes, indeed. That is a position that we should adopt elsewhere. But for the Translation Bureau, it's a first. So it's unique since the beginning. That's what I understood. Do you have some ideas? Is it something that's already been opened up to competition for hiring this particular individual? We're talking about two different positions here. One for the CEO. That's a position that was announced, and we did both an internal and external announcement. It's open to the public service and open elsewhere. The key skills are leadership skills. I've got the list here. Create a vision and a strategy, engage people, preserve integrity and respect. There's a whole list, and at the bottom there's a talk of results, but we're looking for somebody who has leadership qualities and who understands official languages and who is really ready to change course with the Translation Bureau. That's for the CEO. When it comes to the Chief Quality Officer, that's a position we are creating and will be subject to another announcement, but we're waiting to have the CEO in place because it is important to have a common vision and establish synergies. You have quite a challenge for your office. It's like shopping for an extremely modern car, but really it's about respecting official languages within the department. Now, if I understand correctly, by the end of the financial year, a CEO will be hired, and there's going to be an analysis of recommendations. The Chief Quality Officer is going to be hired, which is a unique position in the department. Well, congratulations. I wish you good luck and to hire the best people in Canada. Mr. Choquette. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you again for being here today. I have many questions for you, but I would like to start with an issue. There was a complaint to the Official Languages Commissioner. Certain cuts had been made to official languages. Departments and organizations used the Translation Bureau services less. And there was even perhaps the presence of, we heard that there were ghost translators in different departments. As you know, that is not permitted. What are the measures you are going to take to make sure that different departments and agencies who have contracts with the Translation Bureau will use the Translation Bureau's services and will ensure that they promote both official languages and will also ensure that the quality is there? Of course, you're going to hire a quality control person, but what about using ghost translators, which is not allowed? Mr. Choquette, for me, everything is about quality, whether we have competition or not. This will have to be our watchword. You've seen the measures that have been implemented. I think they will get us there, and that's what will make the difference. This will also make sure that departments and the discussions we may have with colleagues will be interesting discussions when it comes to using our services. But absolutely, the quality must be preserved at all costs in order to have those conversations. If we put all those measures together, we have a vision which I hope will inspire our colleagues and other departments, and we're going to talk about that change of course. If you will allow, I just want to highlight that you are responsible for buying advertising in community media and in Francophone communities in a minority situation. Local media, local newspapers and radio are suffering because not enough advertising is being bought from them. Are you looking into that? There was a report recently that mentioned that the new approach, that the new strategy for procurement was undermining the vitality of local media. I can't say that I have a lot of information on that. When it comes to procurement and advertising, if you prefer, you could send a written response later to the committee. Just send that to the clerk. I would like to give you the opportunity to give an answer for the benefit of all MPs here. Thank you. Now, I'd like to come back to attrition. Are 140 positions still going to be cut by the end of 2017-2018? Is that still in the cards? No. It's a very simple answer. If we look even at the numbers for 2015-16, when we look at the report on plans and priorities, there were 1,165 full-time equivalents, and at the end of the year, it was 1,197, roughly 1,200. We have more full-time equivalents than we had planned for. And I would say that that's where the change occurred, because this year, even if we don't have the final numbers, we know that we hired, and we will continue to do so. That attrition that you mentioned of 140 positions did not happen. How much attrition was there in 2016-17? How many positions were lost through attrition? We don't have a final count, but we'll get back to you. Overall, there's probably no attrition. I think there was an increase. That doesn't mean that there aren't positions that were not abolished after somebody left, and another type of position might have been created subsequently. But right now, we're in hiring mode. Therefore, you can confirm here, for the benefit of MPs, how would I put this, that in 2016-17, that you have a positive track record. I would say that in 2016, there was an increase based on what we had expected. What we had expected was job losses. That's right. We forecasted more. We lost less than we had expected. That's right. So there were some losses? That's what I wanted to know. 2016-17, the time that you get settled. I know that 2015-16, people have to get settled and understand what's going on. But in 2016-17, at the beginning of the year, of the financial year, and by the end of the financial year, do we have more full-time equivalents or less? We can provide that number to you. We expected to lose approximately 40 positions this year, but we hired 19. So you still have a loss of 21. I'm not sure. I'll have to get back to you because I think that are other positions that have been filled. Thank you very much. Thank you, François. And now we'll move on to Paul Lefebvre. Thank you very much. You mentioned that there was a change in direction for the Translation Bureau, and you've added a leadership position. You're looking to hire a chief quality officer and a CEO. But what's our starting point? Was there an action plan before? With a way of perhaps evaluating data? Did every department have one? I also sit on public accounts, and the deputy minister has to have an action plan. What are the measures? How do you measure things? What's the information and the data that you've received? What decisions did you make? What is our starting point? What did we have before? And what is your new plan? How are we going to measure hires, what they do? How are we going to measure that quality? Well, we had a very clear plan. We're implementing the fourth year of that plan with very exact data on the number of people, the cost, the dollars and cents, the cost per word. What I can say for the future is that we need to restart and revise that plan now with the new directives we've received. And I would say that with these changes, a great deal of additional volume has been sent when it comes to translation, interpretation. It has increased. All of that means that it's a good moment for us with the arrival of new leaders to say, what's the plan? And to have exact measures for the next few years. The plan we have now is a 5-year plan. We're on the 4th year of it. But we're going to restart with a new one. What explains all of a sudden that there's an increase? Well, there are more parliamentary committees that are sitting in public. For us, that makes a big difference when it comes to the volume of interpretation. And we were looking at parliamentary translation. It went from 28 million words in 2015-16 to 60 million in 16-17, a significant increase. And when we look at interpretation, there was an increase of about 40% for parliamentary interpretation, a large volume, which is good. It's inspiring. It's exciting to be at the Translation Bureau right now, because we can do many interesting things in the years to come. As I was saying, I sit on public accounts, and there are many departments that appear, and we always insist on the same things. Make sure there's an action plan, that it's measurable, that you measure your data, and that you check, because the Auditor General will hold you to account. And that's how all these committees work. Today, you're reporting on the fact that we're implementing recommendations. You leave and then we don't see you again. How can we be sure that it will be done? At public accounts, we discover that there's problems, that it didn't work. And in other cases, things go well. I just want to assure you that we hope that if the Auditor General comes to see you, that it will be measured and that we have an action plan. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. I just want to reassure you that there's a plan. Things are being measured, whether it be the report on plans and priorities. We have all that. My only nuance is that the plan that we started with is going to change directions, if you will. And we're going to start with new measurements and projections. Thank you very much. Thank you, Paul. Daryl. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the team for being here today. I must say that this is good news and a new beginning. Your 5-year plan being on the 4th year and the vision has changed. Of course, it's time to go back to the table and rebuild a new plan. If there are new hires and new leadership, that vision will be realized. I am entirely confident that Mr. Choquette is worried about the numbers. With an 18-wheeler, you can't turn as quickly as you would with a Corvette. Things change. We're rebuilding our action plan. I'm very pleased about that part. What I would ask is, have you or will you do cooperative programs with other countries that are bilingual, that have 4 languages, 3 languages, that offer translation services? Could you share examples of cooperation that might give ideas to the new leader? Could you share some information on that? There are several, and I will let Adam give you the details. So there are lovely opportunities there. I will give you a few examples. I don't have exact comparisons between Canada and other countries. Europe is one of the best basis of comparison. In the United States, there's some comparison, but they don't use a lot of internal services. It's more in the private sector, and they work via contract. There's Europe, and then there's New Brunswick, their translation bureau, which provides an excellent basis for comparison. We look for basis of comparison in other countries and in other provinces. It's a matter of striking the right balance between the people that we keep working internally, the internal expertise we keep among our employees, and the work that we assign to the private sector. There are challenges with technology and quality, the same discussions with our stakeholders. I remember that the last interaction we had with a representative of the UN from Europe, we were talking about things, and it seemed like the challenges were almost identical. Yes, there are a lot of good examples and good solutions for the new CEO. That's good to hear, because this is the right time. The vision has changed. We're rebuilding our action plan. We hope that a new 5-year plan will be implemented, and it will implement it according to the timeline that's required. How long have you been in position? Since last April, April 11th. April 11th from last year. So for you, it's easy to rework an action plan. So this is an excellent opportunity. In the meantime, what do you intend to do to prepare these files for the next person who's going to join the team? I would say that the most important role I will have to play in the coming weeks is to choose the right person for the Bureau, because the selection committee and myself will conduct interviews, and we need to find the person who will be able to execute the vision that the minister expressed for the Bureau. That is my first duty. And the Translation Bureau is, of course, part of the Public Works team. And I'm there to support them, and we work with them. My colleagues, do I have more time? Yes. My colleagues talked about accountability in the action plan. I believe that there will be accountabilities, and that's fine. That's normal. But perhaps once a year, as a committee, perhaps we should have an update on those developments. And I'm wondering if that plan is there a new plan that's going to be created? Will it be made available to the committee to allow us to be part of that constant improvement? I think it's an excellent idea to come to see you on a more regular basis. As I said, I encourage you to invite the new CEO once they are hired in order to express what you have to say. We're going to be doing the same thing through the reports and recommendations, but please feel free to do so as well. I have to say, and if I put my deputy minister's hat aside, I was listening to you earlier when the minister was there, and I'm quite proud to be a Canadian in this great bilingual country. Congratulations to the committee for its work, and when you want to invite us, we will be back. I just want to conclude with that you can say that there is a nice committee, but effective committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Boucher and Mr. Généreux are going to share their time. I have a question. I didn't jot the numbers down, but there's been an increase. So the first question that came to mind was, is that because the new MPs are less bilingual? What we think explains it is that there are more committees that are open, public, so translation has to be there. That's the lion's share of the increase in volume. It's also the number of committees, and committees were sitting during the summer and they weren't in-camera sessions. There are more televised hearings, more closed captioning is being used. So that's an increase in the workload that is measurable. So it's not, you can't say that it's because people are less bilingual. Well, we don't measure that. Well, I think it's because Liberals are more transparent, much more transparent and much more communicative. Excuse me, okay, Daryl, we're going to go ahead with Mr. Généreux. I'd like my time back, the time he stole from me. Ms. Lemay and witnesses, I'm from the private sector, and we're often called upon to downsize. I've had to manage downsizing situations as well as growth, and I can tell you it's a lot more pleasant managing growth rather than downsizing. It's painful cutting positions when there's belt tightening and budgetary restraint and so on. I'm not really trying to apologize for the decisions we had to make when back in the days when there were cutbacks across the board in all departments. We had to make some tough choices, but there was a very important aspect to it too. The demand dropped, and there was a need for fewer translators and interpreters. But couldn't technology be part of the explanation? Because what you're confirming to me is that with the same staffing levels, you've gone from 28 million words to 60 million words translated from one year to the next. So people, the same amount of people must have had to work a lot harder to get 60 million words translated when the year before they only had to translate 28 million. Is it possible that thanks to technology, fewer people are required to do the same amount of work? Am I right? Well, I'd just like to clarify the increase in the volume of work. We also use the private sector to top up our capacity when there's a spike in the demand. So that's partly how we deal with increases. Now, when it comes to technology, yes, it plays a role. The industry is, of course, evolving. And we have to continue using new technologies. That can be done while respecting translation and interpretation professionals. It can be done in a way that is consistent with bilingualism and respect for quality and respect for both official languages. So I hope that in the years to come, we'll manage to combine all those things. That's our hope. Well, we see things the same way when it comes to that, but a lot of people talked about Portage, which is the translation tool that may one day come into use, come into being. I'd just like to know, what's the status update on that tool, Portage? And there were a lot of questions with our witnesses about the quality of the translation tool, the quality of the databases that would feed into that tool. Where are things at with the tool? I think my colleagues may be able to help. I believe that Portage is available in 39 departments currently. When I first heard the conversation around Portage, and it was a bit surprising for me, but it's largely thanks to the comments that you folks made, but it really gives government officials an opportunity to express themselves in their mother tongue. It's to serve public servants. As a Francophone, I can write things in French. That was the purpose of that tool. Are you telling me that, because there was a lot of discussion about it being a comprehension tool rather than a translation tool. Now, are you confirming that it's a comprehension tool? Yes, it's a comprehension tool. Absolutely. We did a study. We hired a firm to examine the usefulness of that tool. I'm not sure when they're supposed to report on that. I think early spring. So what are the questions being asked of each department? Well, the purpose is consistent with the evaluation policy. So we're looking at the usefulness of the tool. Is it meeting the goals that were set for it? We're going to talk to users. The most recent stats show that about 500,000 queries have been an equal percentage of in English and French. So the tool is being used. It is working within the federal government, and we implemented all the recommendations of this committee. Do MPs have access to that tool? Are there any MPs who have access to Portage? No. The tool is for the exclusive use of public servants because the terminology, the lexical databases are for it's language that's used in the public service. But as the minister said, we may have an opportunity to take stock of this tool, see how it's used, how it's perceived, and then we could potentially consider expanding. Would it be possible for this committee to learn the results of that study when it's done? Yes, absolutely. We'll keep you abreast of that. And did you say that you said there were 500,000 queries? Okay. So it's not 500,000 words, it's 500,000 queries. Yes, 500,000 expressions or words or phrases were looked up. So searches, if you will, 500,000 searches were done using that tool. And there's also a kind of warning that comes along with the tool that encourages people to use professional translators for official translations. So we clarified that language and changed the description of the tool. Well, we'll certainly ask you to keep us informed of the results of that study. All right, that brings this meeting to an end. But before we go, I'd just like to mention that behind all of us there are teams, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of the team. of this team, the committee, for the excellent work that you're doing, Ms. Lemay, as well as the people on your team and the Translation Bureau. So that is it for today's meeting. And once again, thanks very much. The meeting is adjourned.